which is hard to imagine.
And it really is a testament to your talent as a filmmaker that you evoke 1962 with such absolute authenticity. Because so was I, so I can attest firsthand. And this really came roaring back to me a couple of months ago when X-Men First Class came out, which is also supposed to be in 1962, and there's nothing 1962 about it. The makeup, the hair, the costumes, the dialogue, it all screams 2010. And I don't think anybody who made that picture was even alive.
Well, but I think that's an aesthetic choice. You know, I mean, for this movie, well, for this movie, we really wanted it to be authentic. And let me tell you how hard it is to get Dixie cups from 1962. I mean, it's one of the hardest things there is to find. But it was easy for me because I had saved a lot of crap from when I was a kid. So a lot of the props and stuff in the kids' room, it's all my stuff. I mean, I did the drawings on the wall. Those are my posters and my Monster magazines and all that stuff. I just had to pull them out of boxes and take them to Florida.
Now, we should also mention a now very famous big star made her American debut.
We shouldn't tell you who it is.
We won't tell you who it is.
We won't tell you who it is, but a certain big star has a small role in this picture. And I think you could probably spot her. But you'll see her in the credits at the end anyway. But she's a lovely, wonderful actress, and I knew that while I was working with her that this was not going to be the kind of movie that she was going to be doing for the rest of her life. And sure enough, you know, about 8 years later, she made a big splash, and now is one of the major actresses.
Did you just come in for cold reading, or?
Actually, she was recommended to me by someone who had worked with her, which I can't remember now. But the trick about making movies in Florida is that there's a lot of local talent, and you know, you don't want to bring too many people from elsewhere because you know it adds to the budget. And this was, as most of our movies are, a fairly low budget picture.
Were a lot of the kids local? I mean,
almost all the kids were local, and the trick with kids is that kids come in batches. And when you make a movie with kids in it, sometimes there's a lot of good kids to choose from, and other times it's just sort of a drought, and there really aren't a lot of good kids. And this particular period, all the kids were kind of Disney Channel reject kids who have been taught to be cute, and you know, did a lot of posing and a lot of cutesy stuff, and it just doesn't work. So we actually had to go to England to find the lead kid, and I don't think you can tell in the movie at all. But he's actually British, and we have a dialogue coach, and I haven't thought of any places where he sweats up. I mean, he really does a great American accent, and almost no one has ever noticed that he was not an American kid.
I didn't know. And I also wanted to ask you, I mean, excluding Mant, to the best of my recollection, or at least thinking, these two are the only two theatrical features you did that absolutely have no supernatural elements whatsoever. They're completely, quote, real, unquote.
Well, that's probably true.
Now, do you find
I was on Woman on the Moon, but I didn't do that.
Yeah.
You know?
But
I have no idea why.
Well, the dummy switch actually worked. Yeah.
Well, that's extra. But that was kind of...
Yeah. Yeah, poor Dick. But I mean, did you find that more of a challenge because you didn't have?
I never even thought about it, honestly. It just didn't even occur to me. I mean, when a job comes up, you take the job for what it is. You can't. I mean, in my early movies like Piranha, which was started out as a rampaging animal kind of movie that could happen to anybody, I thought, oh, I like science fiction. I want science fiction in this movie, so I put in science fiction stuff, and I put in a mad doctor, and I put in a little stop-motion creature which had no business being in the movie. And I did it just because I like that kind of stuff, and I thought, well, people see that, they'll know what kind of movie it is.
Yeah, for the most part, you wait for the payoff with the little...
Well, there used to be a payoff in that movie. So if we had the money, we would have them come back at really giant size and tear it on the Santa Monica Pier, but we couldn't afford that. Cheap movie.
What are you working on now?
I'm working on funding my next movie, which almost every filmmaker in town is doing the same thing. So you used to be you could stand on the street corner with your hat out and say, "Would you fund my movie?" Now you have to fly to Europe and put your hat out and say, "Will you fund your movie?" And you can't just go to one person because no one person funds movies. It's now consortium. I mean, you go to the movies, you see how many presentation credits there are. You know, how many company credits, and it makes you wonder when it comes time for bookkeeping, how do they figure out who gets what? I mean, I don't know. That's the business we're in now. what can I say?
Any questions? Start down here.
Years ago, you talked about doing a movie about the animators and termite terror.
Yes, I did. Well, I had a wonderful script by Charlie Haas, and it was about Chuck Jones's early days at Warner Brothers. And it taught me a lesson. One thing is, don't write scripts about characters you don't own. Because this was, I couldn't take the script to Universal and say, let's make it about Walter Lance and Woody Woodpecker. It was really about that. And when Warner Brothers decided that they didn't want to use their characters in that way, they wanted to make Space Jam instead, it just went into the drawer where it will remain. But it's a lovely script.
Wow.
Back there.
Well, first off, I just want to say I think Vincent Canby was wrong.
You're not the first person to say that about Vincent Canby.
And then I have a sort of two-part question, so don't hate it. This movie played like a real director's movie. It just seemed like the vision was something that was there from the start. With a lot of the camera movements, the way you held the shots and everything. And it's something that I don't really see that much in movies now.
Because I'm not working.
It seems like right now it's just the movies are shot with a lot of coverage. There's so many things that really bland. I don't think it's shot with a producer or something. I don't know what it is, but I was wondering what you make of the movies that are made now in terms of vision. And second, do you think a movie like this could be made now?
Does everybody hear the questions? Okay.
Could a movie like this be made now with the right stars? Maybe. I think it would be considered a little small right now, unless more things blow up. As you know, in the old days you could have a couple things blow up at the end of the movie, and that was the end of your movie. But now things have to start blowing up in real time, and they have to keep blowing up and getting bigger. And by the time you get to the movie, you've seen 7 endings that would have been any one of which would have been good enough for a movie 20 years ago. But that's not the way it works now. There's a current theory about it's called chaos movies, and the idea that pictures like the Bourne Identity, where instead of people knowing spatially what's going on in an action scene, they're cut and shot in a way that you don't know what you're watching. It's just a blur, as it would be. People say as it would be if it was really happening to you, which is it's a legitimate viewpoint, but it doesn't necessarily make for clarity in filmmaking, and so. You find that a lot of people who are making movies now grew up making commercials, started out making commercials or music videos or things that were short and you didn't need to hold people's attention particularly. And the audience now is kind of conditioned to seeing things fast. They've got their clickers. They've seen all these shows and they want the show. They want the image to change a lot. You can't show them a John Ford movie because they can't use wandering wires and holding the shot for so long. And it's a way of seeing it. It's just the way things go. I mean, it's as different as silent movies were to me when I was growing up. It's just the way things are, and it's an aesthetic that's going to either stick around or not.
I think it's because they're just too inept to know how to stage an action scene, so they do all that fast cutting and coverage to hide that fact.
Well, you could say that.
I just did. In the back.
Which part does the writer play in the Burbs?
The writer is the cop who tells Carrie Fisher that she shouldn't cross the line. He's the co-producer also.
Gentleman in the blue shirt back there. Yes. The one. Yeah. The one that looks like Paul Bartel.
Is that a compliment?
I'd say so.
Just wondering how you came to cast Rick Dukeman and why you think you would never use like again. He steals the movie.
Rick is a guy who actually came from a very wealthy background. He was a businessman, and he decided to become a stand-up comic at that point in his life. And there were a lot of names bandied about for that part, bigger names, that you recognize. But there was just something about Rick that was so, and I say this with affection, was so obnoxious that he had that down. And he blew away everybody else who and you'd be surprised how famous those people were. But there was just, and also he and Tom didn't really get along that well. And it was great for the movie. Because there was a certain tension in their relationship that I don't think he would have gotten if we had hired one of Tom's friends or or somebody that I had worked with before. And Rick did go on to do some other stuff. He's got a fairly decent supporting part in Groundhog Day as a sewer worker. If you haven't seen that recently. I used him again in Gremlins too. I had a gremlin bite his nose. But for the most part, I think he does stand up. He hasn't done that many movies, but I agree, he is really quite funny in this, and he makes up a lot of his own dialogue.
Well, you got to be some kind of obnoxious to piss off Tom Hanks. Lady down here.
About the ending, about this ending was chosen, like David didn't come home with Carol, and like her hair was shorter. Like, does it have something to do with the writer's strike? Did she don't have time, or why?
No, he did. Actually, the kid was there. He just didn't see him. He was in the car with the dog. And her hair was shorter because this was a reshoot. And so we had Tom say, "Oh, you changed your hair." I like it.
Gentleman here?
Gary Goldsmith. Thought anything.
Enough said. Jerry, I had a wonderful relationship with Jerry, who made every movie that I've done.
Best music for you.
What, this one?
His best scores are for you.
Oh, that's not true. That's not true. But he did. But I was thrilled with everything he did, and I would throw him curves. Like, for instance, almost every movie I would do, he would have to write an opening theme that could go over a kid riding a bicycle. And it's astounding how many different ways he was able to do that. And the Burbs is kind of an interesting example, because when I gave it to him, it was tracked with largely Ennio Morricone music. And the theme for Tom Hanks was the theme from For a Few Dollars More. And one thing that Jerry wrote great Western music, but he didn't get Morricone. He didn't get how that works. And so there is a little scene in the picture where you notice most of the time there is a Western theme for Tom at the end, and he comes out of the house and everything. But there's one section where he just couldn't get it to be what I wanted. And when they walk up to the house and get attacked by the bees, and it zooms into everybody's eyes, we ended up buying Morricone. We ended up buying a piece from My Name is Nobody and cutting the scene to that. Because even though, and I swear, Jerry must have written 4 or 5 different pieces for this. And we went back and we'd redone it. We would go back to the mixing room and we would try it again, and it just somehow was never as good as the temp music that we had on it. And so in a rare case of not using Jerry's music, we just bought the music, which is luckily a Universal Picture at the time. And the scene worked great. And he agreed. He said, "Fine, it's better this way."
And as I was saying to you